I am Allison, 32, and my life flipped upside down with one phone call. My sister Brittany, breathless with excitement, told me to pack everything. I bought a penthouse, top floor, city views, doorman the works. You're moving in with me. After years of living paycheck to paycheck in my cramped apartment, I was speechless. My sister, who'd always been reckless but never successful, had somehow made it. But the moment the building manager showed up at the door, I realized my sister's gift was the beginning of my nightmare. Before I dive into this wild story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Hit that like button if you've ever trusted someone you shouldn't have, and subscribe to join our community of survivors and thrivers. Now, let's get into how my sister's generosity nearly destroyed my life. Growing up, Brittany and I lived very different versions of the same childhood. Our parents divorced when I was 12 and she was 14, leaving our mom to raise two daughters on a teaching assistant's salary. While I adapted by becoming responsible, working part-time jobs through high school, and earning scholarships for college, Brittany chose a different path. Why work so hard when you can work smart? AVER became her life motto by 16. This working smart meant manipulating our grandfather into buying her a car by claiming she needed it for a non-existent hospital volunteer position. It meant borrowing mom's credit card for online shopping sprees, then crying until she was forgiven. It meant copying my homework, but somehow getting better grades because teachers found her charming. I still remember the night before my high school graduation when I found her rummaging through my room. "Just looking for that necklace I lent you," she claimed, though I'd never borrowed her jewelry. The next day, I discovered $200 missing from the envelope, where I'd saved for college textbooks. When confronted, she looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Prove it." Mom believed her, as always. College separated us geographically, but didn't end the pattern. During my sophomore year, Brittany showed up at my dorm unannounced, fleeing an angry ex-boyfriend who claimed she'd emptied their joint bank account. I let her stay for just 2 weeks that turned into a semester. She dated 3 of my friends, borrowed my car without permission, and left owing me $1,500 I never saw again. Then came the wedding incident 5 years ago. As her maid of honor, I found myself covering bills when vendors threatened to cancel after her checks bounced. The marriage lasted 8 months, just long enough for her to drain her husband's savings before he discovered her secret credit cards. Despite everything, some naive part of me still wanted to believe in her. We shared blood, history, and the memory of huddling together during our parents' explosive arguments. I kept thinking maturity would eventually catch up with her charisma. In the years since, I'd built a decent life for myself. My marketing job at a mid-sized firm wasn't glamorous, but it paid enough to cover my small apartment and still chip away at my student loans. I drove a 10-year-old Honda and tracked every dollar on a budgeting app. It wasn't exciting, but it was honest and sustainable. Then came last month's family dinner to celebrate our grandmother's birthday. Brittany arrived 3 hours late in a new BMW, dressed in designer clothes, wrists jangling with bracelets. "Cryptocurrency," she announced when our cousin commented on her apparent newfound wealth. "Got in early on a couple of coins. Made a killing." She spent the evening dropping hints about her investment group and exclusive opportunities, her eyes gleaming when relatives asked for tips. I kept quiet, having heard similar stories before. There was the import-export business phase, the social media consultant period, and briefly, the dating a hedge fund manager era. None had produced legitimate, lasting success. So when Brittany appeared at my door 3 days after that dinner, I was suspicious but curious. She was practically vibrating with excitement. "I've done it, Allie," she said, using my childhood nickname. "All those years of hustling, networking, taking risks, they've finally paid off. And I want you to be part of it." She pulled up photos on her phone. A stunning penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows, marble countertops, and a terrace overlooking the city. "It's ours," she said. "Well, technically it's mine, but I want you to live there too. You've always been the responsible one, the good sister. You deserve this." I peppered her with questions about mortgage approval, down payment sources, maintenance fees. She had plausible answers for everything, mentioning crypto investments, a silent business partner, and market timing. "Look," she finally said, exasperated. "I know I've let you down before. I know I've been selfish. This is me trying to make things right. Can't you just trust me this once? Against every rational instinct, I found myself nodding. Maybe people really could change. Maybe this was Brittany's redemption story. Maybe, just maybe, my sister had finally found legitimate success and wanted to share it with me. It would turn out to be the most expensive mistake of my life. The penthouse exceeded even the photos Brittany had shown me. Located in the prestigious Westbrook Tower, the 3,200 square foot space featured 3 bedrooms, each with an ensuite bathroom, a chef's kitchen with top-of-the-line appliances, and a living room that flowed onto a private terrace with a hot tub. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a 270-degree view of the city skyline, with sunlight streaming in to illuminate the polished hardwood floors. "This is really ours?" I whispered the first time we stepped inside, my voice echoing slightly in the cavernous space. "All ours," Brittany confirmed, twirling through the empty rooms. "I'll take the master suite, of course, but you can have either of the others. They're basically identical." Within hours of our arrival, the deliveries began. Movers brought in leather couches, glass tables, and plush king-size beds. Brittany directed them with the confidence of someone accustomed to luxury, tipping generously and chatting about her other properties. That evening, she produced a bottle of Dom Perignon and 2 crystal flutes. To new beginnings, she toasted, the city lights twinkling behind her, and to finally living the life we deserve. I gave notice at my apartment the next day, breaking my lease and forfeiting my security deposit in my eagerness to escape the cramped space with its perpetually dripping faucet and temperamental heating. Compared to the penthouse, my furniture looked shabby and worn, so Brittany convinced me to sell most of it online. "Fresh start, fresh furnishings," she insisted, offering to advance me money for a few quality pieces. Our neighbors seemed equally impressed by the penthouse's new occupants. We met the Davidsons from 31B in the elevator, a finance executive and his wife who immediately invited us to their upcoming cocktail party. The retired judge in 31 Amperes brought over a bottle of wine to welcome us to the top floor club. "You must be in tech," he guessed, looking around at our luxurious surroundings. "Investments, actually," Brittany replied smoothly. "My sister and I have an eye for opportunities." I smiled uncomfortably, feeling like an imposter, but telling myself I'd get used to this new reality. Only small things seemed odd. When I asked to see the closing paperwork for the property, partly out of curiosity about its value, Brittany was evasive. "It's all being handled by my business manager," she said. "Boring legal stuff. I'll show you when everything's finalized." When a letter arrived addressed to Westbrook residents about an upcoming homeowners association meeting, Brittany quickly intercepted it. "I'll handle all that bureaucratic nonsense," she said. "You focus on enjoying yourself." Then there was the matter of the keys. Despite supposedly owning the place, Brittany seemed to have only one set, which she guarded closely. When I suggested getting duplicates made, she became strangely agitated. "The building uses a special security system," she claimed. "Only management can authorize new keys. I'm waiting for approval." 3 days after moving in, Brittany introduced me to Richard, her business partner. Tall, tanned, and expensively dressed, he exuded the smooth confidence of a luxury car salesman. "Brittany tells me you're the brains of the family," he said, shaking my hand with a grip that lingered uncomfortably long. "We could use someone with your analytical skills in our operation." When I asked about the nature of their business, his answers were impressively vague. Asset management, exclusive investment opportunities, and proprietary trading algorithms. He dropped names of celebrities and tech billionaires as their clients, while never quite explaining what services they provided. "You should quit that marketing job," Brittany urged after he left. "Richard thinks you'd be perfect for client relations in our Singapore office. 6 figures, minimum." "I'd need to know more about the business first," I said cautiously. Brittany's smile tightened slightly. "Don't you trust me? After all this?" She gestured around at our luxurious surroundings. That night, alone in my beautiful new bedroom, I found myself strangely unsettled. Everything had happened so quickly, from Brittany's sudden appearance to my complete life transformation in less than a week. The mattress was more comfortable than any I'd ever slept on. The sheets had a thread count higher than my previous monthly budget. But something felt off. I tried accessing the building's resident portal online, hoping to find information about amenities or rules, but needed an owner code Brittany hadn't provided. I considered calling the management office directly, but hesitated, not wanting to appear ignorant about a building I supposedly lived in. Instead, I told myself to relax and enjoy this unexpected blessing. My responsible, cautious nature was just struggling to accept good fortune. Brittany had finally made something of herself and wanted to share her success. That was all. If only I'd listened to my instincts before everything fell apart. On the 5th morning in our penthouse paradise, Brittany left early for what she described as meetings with potential investors. I was enjoying my coffee on the terrace, still in pajamas, savoring a rare day off work, when the doorbell rang. Standing outside were two men, one in a tailored suit with a building management badge, the other in a security uniform. "Good morning," the suited man said. "I'm Jason Parker, building manager. May I ask who you are and what you're doing in the Thornton residence?" My coffee mug nearly slipped from my fingers. "I'm Allison Reed. I live here with my sister, Brittany. She purchased this unit recently." Jason's expression shifted from professional politeness to concern. "Miss Reed, this penthouse belongs to the Thornton family. They're currently in Europe for 6 months, but certainly haven't sold their property." The security guard stepped forward slightly, hand resting near his radio. "There must be some mistake," I stammered, heat rising to my face. "My sister showed me all the photos before we moved in. She said the deal closed last week." "May I come in?" Jason asked, though it didn't sound optional. Inside, he surveyed the furnishings with growing alarm. These aren't the Thorntons' belongings. Where are their things? Reality began crashing down around me. When we arrived, the place was empty. Brittany had furniture delivered. Jason pulled out his phone and showed me pictures of the penthouse, the same layout but with entirely different decoration. This is how the Thorntons left it. Their furniture is gone. The next hour passed in a blur of humiliation and horror. Jason called the police, who took preliminary statements. The Thorntons were being contacted in Barcelona. I learned that a maintenance request for the HVAC system had prompted Jason's visit, a request neither Brittany nor I had made. "How did you even get in here?" Jason demanded. "Brittany had keys," I replied, my voice small. She said everything was finalized through her business manager. The officer taking notes looked up. "And where is your sister now?" I tried calling Brittany repeatedly, each attempt going straight to voicemail. Texts went unanswered. The police officer suggested I gather my belongings while they investigated. "You have 48 hours to vacate," Jason informed me. His earlier concern hardened into suspicion. "That's being generous, considering the circumstances. After that, if you haven't left voluntarily, you'll be removed and charged with criminal trespassing." "But all my things, I broke my lease, sold my furniture." "That's not the Thorntons' problem," he replied coldly. "Or mine." After they left, I collapsed onto the couch, a couch I now realized was obtained through fraud, and tried to process what had happened. Somehow, Brittany had gained unauthorized access to an empty penthouse. Somehow, she'd convinced me to upend my entire life based on this elaborate lie. And now, she was unreachable. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Heard you had visitors. Don't talk to anyone else. I can fix this. Meet me at Riverside Cafe in 30 minutes. Richard." Desperation almost drove me to the meeting before reason prevailed. Richard was clearly part of whatever scheme Brittany had orchestrated. Instead, I called my workplace, only to discover something even more disturbing. "Allison, we received your resignation email 3 days ago," my manager said, confusion evident in her voice. "You said you were relocating overseas for a family business opportunity." I had sent no such email. When I checked my bank accounts, I found them nearly drained, with transfers to unfamiliar accounts over the past several days. My credit cards were maxed out with purchases I hadn't made. My identity hadn't just been borrowed for a luxury housing scam, it had been comprehensively hijacked. As evening fell, the penthouse door finally opened. Brittany strolled in as if returning from a normal day out. "Why aren't you answering your phone?" I demanded, voice shaking. "The building manager was here. The police were here. They know this isn't our apartment." Rather than showing shock or remorse, Brittany's expression hardened. "Who exactly did you talk to? What exactly did you tell them? Her reaction was so far from what I expected that I momentarily forgot my anger. What does it matter what I told them? We're illegally occupying someone else's home. We have 48 hours to get out before they press charges. Brittany placed her designer handbag on the counter and removed her sunglasses. Don't be so dramatic. This is a simple misunderstanding that money can fix. What money, Brittany? The money you've stolen from my accounts? The money from the job I apparently resigned from? She had the audacity to look offended. I had to make it look legitimate. You'll get it all back and more once we move to the next phase. Next phase of what? Your complete destruction of my life? The doorbell rang again. Brittany smiled. That'll be Richard and Cameron. They'll explain everything. Trust me, this isn't nearly the disaster you think it is. As she moved to open the door, I realized with sickening clarity that whatever was coming next would only drag me deeper into her web of deception, one I might never escape. Richard walked in with a tall, muscular man I hadn't met before. The newcomer, Cameron, I presumed had close-cropped hair and cold eyes that assessed me like I was a problem to be solved. You've really complicated things, Allison, Richard said, helping himself to a glass of what was undoubtedly the Thorntons' expensive scotch. We had a good system going until you panicked. System? I echoed. You mean fraud? Theft? Breaking and entering? Brittany sat beside me on the couch, attempting to appear sympathetic. Allie, listen, it's not what you think. Then explain it, I demanded. Explain why we're living in someone else's home. Explain why my bank accounts are empty and I've apparently quit my job. My sister exchanged glances with her partners before sighing dramatically. Fine. We identify high-end properties whose owners are away for extended periods. We temporarily repurpose them. You mean steal them? I corrected. Borrow, Brittany insisted. The owners are wealthy enough to have multiple homes. These places sit empty most of the year anyway. Richard took over with the casual confidence of someone explaining a perfectly reasonable business model. We find ways to access the properties, sometimes through maintenance staff, sometimes through building employees who don't ask too many questions when given enough cash. Then we live in them? I asked incredulously. Sometimes, Cameron spoke for the first time, his voice surprisingly soft for his imposing presence. But usually, we use them as staging locations. Staging for what? Brittany's impatience showed. For meeting clients, of course. Rich people trust other rich people. When potential investors see us in these penthouses, driving luxury cars, wearing designer clothes, they assume we're legitimate. They hand over their money much more readily. The full picture began taking shape in my mind. So you're running an investment scam. You pretend to be successful to trick people into giving you money for fake opportunities. The opportunities aren't fake, Richard objected, sounding genuinely offended. They're just speculative. And where do I fit into this? I asked, although I was beginning to understand my sister's plan with sickening clarity. Cameron dropped a folder on the coffee table. Inside were loan applications, credit card forms, and lease agreements all bearing my signature. Or rather, forgeries of my signature. You've been very busy financially, he remarked with a smirk. We needed someone with clean credit, Brittany explained, as if this justified everything. Your records were perfect. No late payments, solid employment history, excellent debt-to-income ratio. I leafed through the documents with growing horror. Car leases for vehicles I'd never seen. Rental applications for apartments in cities I'd never visited. Personal loans totaling over $200,000. You've destroyed me, I whispered. My credit, my job, my home, everything. Don't be so dramatic, Brittany rolled her eyes. It's all fixable. We just need you to play along for a few more months. Be the responsible face of our enterprise when needed. Then we cash out, pay everything off, and you walk away with a nice profit. And if I refuse? If I go straight to the police? The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees as Cameron leaned forward. Then you'll be explaining why your signature is on all those fraudulent documents. Why your fingerprints are all over this apartment. Why your personal items are here. It would be your word against ours, Richard added smoothly. And there are 3 of us. Think about it, Brittany urged. Mom and Dad always believed me over you. Remember the missing graduation money? The borrowed car you overreacted about? Why would this be any different? The crushing truth of her words hit me like a physical blow. Brittany had spent our entire lives perfecting her ability to manipulate perceptions, to twist situations until she emerged blameless while others took the fall. Now she'd escalated from petty thefts to organized crime, and she'd made me the perfect scapegoat. I tried one last appeal to whatever remnant of sisterly feeling might remain. How could you do this to me? Your own sister? Brittany's expression softened momentarily. The first genuine emotion I'd seen from her. I'm not doing this to you. I'm doing it with you. This is your chance to finally live without constantly worrying about bills and budgets. Don't you deserve that after everything you've been through? For one weak moment, I almost considered it. The allure of financial freedom, of never again checking my account balance before making a purchase, was powerful. Then Cameron ruined the illusion by adding, "Besides, you're already implicated. Might as well enjoy the benefits of the crime you'll be accused of anyway." While they discussed next steps, I excused myself to use the bathroom, taking my phone. Once inside, I discovered what I'd feared: my laptop and passport were missing from my bags. They'd clearly been preparing for my potential defection. Glancing at my phone, I saw a text from Megan, the neighbor who'd welcomed us with wine our first day. "Everything okay? Saw police earlier. Let me know if you need anything." In that moment, I made my decision. I couldn't continue down this path, couldn't become what my sister had always been. Somehow, I had to escape the trap Brittany had set, even if it meant losing everything. I returned from the bathroom with what I hoped was a convincing expression of resignation. "You're right. I'm already involved. Might as well see it through." The relief on Brittany's face seemed genuine. "I knew you'd be reasonable. This is going to work out for everyone. I promise." Richard outlined their immediate plans. We would vacate the Thornton penthouse before the 48-hour deadline, moving to another acquired property in a different luxury building across town. I would need to attend an investor meeting the following week, playing the role of their financial compliance officer. "Your background in marketing makes you perfect," he explained. "You know how to present information persuasively without technically lying." As they talked, I nodded at appropriate intervals while mentally cataloging what I would need. Some clothes, my essential documents, those they hadn't already taken, medication, and my phone charger. Everything else was replaceable. "I'm exhausted," I finally said around midnight. "I need to process all this. Can we continue tomorrow?" Cameron looked suspicious, but Brittany waved him off. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we'll start fresh." In my bedroom, I packed a small bag with essentials, hiding it under the bed. Then I set my alarm for 5:30 a.m., knowing Brittany had never willingly risen before 9 inches her life. When morning came, I moved silently through the penthouse. As expected, Brittany was deeply asleep, while Richard and Cameron had apparently left sometime in the night. I grabbed my hidden bag and slipped out the door, taking the emergency stairs rather than the elevator to avoid security cameras. Instead of leaving the building, however, I went down to the 31st floor and knocked softly on Megan's door. We'd only met twice, but something about her warm demeanor gave me hope she might help. When she opened the door in pajamas, her eyes widened at my disheveled appearance. "Allison, what's wrong?" "I need help," I whispered. "I'm in trouble. Can I come in? Just for a little while?" To my eternal gratitude, she stepped aside without hesitation. Inside her apartment, tastefully decorated, but modest compared to the penthouse I broke down, telling her everything between sobs. "My sister and her partners are criminals. They've stolen my identity, emptied my accounts, and I think they're planning to make me take the fall for their schemes. I don't know what to do." Rather than showing horror or asking me to leave, Megan made coffee and listened intently. When I finished my story, she said something unexpected. "My brother is an attorney who specializes in fraud cases. Let me call him." While we waited for her brother to arrive, my phone exploded with notifications. First came confused texts from Brittany. "Where are you? We need to talk about next steps." These quickly escalated to threats. "Don't be stupid, Allie. You have nowhere to go." Richard's messages were more direct. "You're making a serious mistake." Most disturbing were the ones from Cameron. "We know where your mother lives. Think carefully about your next move." Megan's brother David arrived within the hour. A serious man in his 40s with kind eyes that reminded me of his sister's. He listened to my story without interruption, taking occasional note. "You're in a dangerous situation," he said when I finished. "These people are clearly experienced in fraud and identity theft. The good news is, you came to us before things escalated further." "What should I do?" I asked. "Go to the police?" "Eventually, yes." He nodded. "But first, we need to secure what's left of your identity and gather evidence. Right now, it's your word against theirs, and they've been very careful to implicate you." Over the next few hours, I called my bank to report fraud, contacted the 3 major credit bureaus to place freezes, and filed an identity theft report online. David helped me document everything: the unauthorized account access, the forged signatures, the fraudulent credit applications. Meanwhile, Megan kept lookout, reporting that Brittany had stormed out of the building around noon, looking furious. My phone continued receiving increasingly threatening messages, which David advised me to save as evidence. That afternoon, I received a call from Patricia, my mother's best friend who had been like an aunt to me growing up. "Allison, sweetheart, I just had the strangest call from Brittany. She says you've had some kind of breakdown, that you've stolen money from her and disappeared. Your mother is beside herself with worry." My heart sank as I realized Brittany was already working to discredit me with family. "Patricia, that's not true. Brittany's involved in something illegal, and she's trying to drag me into it." The hesitation in her voice told me everything. "Well, you know your sister has always been a bit dramatic," but she sounded very concerned. "She mentioned you might contact me and to let her know immediately if you did. Please don't tell her we spoke," I begged. "I'm safe, but I need time to sort this out." "Of course, dear," she said, though her tone lacked conviction. "Take care of yourself." After ending the call, I turned to David with despair. "She's going to tell Brittany, isn't she?" He nodded grimly. "Probably. We need to move quickly." That evening, checking my email on Megan's tablet, since I didn't trust my own devices, I discovered Brittany had been busy. She'd sent messages to my friends claiming I was having mental health issues, contacted my former workplace, alleging I'd stolen company information before quitting, and even reached out to my ex-boyfriend seeking information about my recent erratic behavior. Most alarmingly, she'd somehow gained access to my email account despite my having changed the password that morning. "They're more sophisticated than I thought," David mused. "They've probably installed keyloggers on your devices." The next morning brought the devastating news that Patricia had indeed informed Brittany of our conversation. Within hours, my mother called, her voice tight with worry and doubt. "Allison, what's going on? Brittany says you've stolen her investment client's money and disappeared. She's frantic." "Mom, that's not true. Brittany's involved in fraud. She and her partners have stolen my identity and emptied my accounts. They're trying to frame me." The silence on the other end spoke volumes. "Honey, are you getting help? Brittany mentioned you've been under a lot of stress lately." No matter what I said, I could hear the skepticism in her voice. Just as Brittany had predicted, our mother was inclined to believe her version of events, the version where I was the unstable one, the one having a breakdown. After hanging up, I curled into a ball on Megan's guest bed, feeling more alone than ever. My sister had systematically cut me off from every support system, poisoning my relationships with lies before I could tell my truth. "They've taken everything," I whispered to Megan. "My money, my reputation, my family's trust." She sat beside me, determined. "Not everything. You still have your integrity. And now you have us. We're going to fight back." In that moment of rock bottom, I made a decision. I wouldn't run, wouldn't hide, wouldn't let Brittany win this time. Whatever came next, I would face it head on. The next morning, David arrived with a comprehensive plan. "We need to build an irrefutable case," he explained, spreading documents across Megan's dining table. "Your sister and her partners have been careful, but nobody's perfect. They've left traces we can follow." We started with a detailed timeline of events, from Brittany's sudden reappearance in my life through the discovery of the fraud. I documented every conversation, every text message, every strange occurrence I could remember. "The key is establishing a pattern," David explained. "This clearly wasn't their first scam." Using Megan's computer rather than my compromised devices, we began researching, David had access to legal databases through his firm, while I combed through social media and news reports. Megan, who worked in hospital administration, took a personal day to help. By mid-afternoon, we had our first breakthrough. A local news article from 8 months earlier described a luxury condo association discovering unauthorized occupants in a unit whose owners were traveling abroad. The article didn't name suspects, but the methods matched exactly what Brittany had done with the Thornton penthouse. "This is just what they failed at," David noted grimly. "Imagine how many times they've succeeded." Further research uncovered similar incidents in 3 other cities within the past 2 years. In one case, security camera footage had captured images of a woman resembling Brittany entering the building with a man who looked strikingly like Richard. More disturbing was what we discovered about Richard himself. Facial recognition software in David's legal database identified him as Ryan Thompson, who had served 14 months for investment fraud in Florida 3 years earlier. The pieces were falling into place. Cameron proved more elusive until Megan had an inspiration. Check sports recruiting. That build, that military bearing, he might have been an athlete. Sure enough, we found Cameron Delaney, former college football player who'd been dismissed from his team following gambling allegations. His post-collegiate career included stints as a nightclub bouncer and personal trainer before he disappeared from public records 2 years ago, right when the property scams began appearing. "They're building a network," David theorized. "Brittany identifies properties and handles the social engineering. Richard brings the investment fraud expertise. Cameron provides muscle and intimidation when needed." The most heartbreaking discovery came when we found an online forum for fraud victims. Reading through the posts, I recognized Brittany's methods described by others. The charm, the promises of exclusive investment opportunities, the gradual escalation of commitment. One post particularly stood out. "She became like family. I trusted her completely. By the time I realized what was happening, she'd taken everything and disappeared." That's their pattern, I realized. They don't just steal money or property, they steal trust. That's what makes them so effective. Armed with this research, David helped me compile documentation to support filing comprehensive police reports. We gathered screenshots, printed news articles, created timelines, and assembled everything into organized files. "Now for the most difficult part," David said. "We need to get Brittany on record admitting to aspects of the scheme." "She'll never confess to me," I pointed out. "She knows I'm onto her." "Not directly," he agreed. "But if she believes she's convincing you to rejoin them, she might reveal enough to incriminate herself." The plan was risky but necessary. I would arrange to meet Brittany, wearing a recording device David provided through his legal contacts. Megan would be nearby as backup, with David monitoring remotely. Before proceeding, I went to Jason, the building manager, to explain the situation and request security footage showing Brittany entering the Thornton penthouse. Initially skeptical, he softened after hearing my full story and seeing the evidence we'd gathered. "The Thorntons are pressing charges regardless," he informed me. "But I can provide footage showing when and how they accessed the unit initially. That might help your case." The security video revealed Brittany and Cameron entering the service entrance 3 weeks earlier, Cameron distracting the maintenance worker while Brittany slipped through the staff elevator. Additional footage showed them bringing in small loads of personal items over several days before finally moving me in, carefully establishing our presence before I arrived. As we finalized our preparations, I received a text from an unexpected source. "Patricia, my mother's friend. Allison, I owe you an apology." Brittany called asking for money, claiming it was for your treatment. When I hesitated, she became hostile. "I've known you your whole life. This isn't you. What can I do to help?" The validation nearly brought me to tears. At least one person from my past life believed me. With growing confidence in our case, I sent Brittany a carefully worded message. "We need to talk. Not about rejoining you, but about damage control. Meet me tomorrow, just you, at Riverside Cafe, 2 p.m. Her response came quickly. "Smart decision. I knew you'd come around." That night, as I prepared for the confrontation, David received alarming news from a colleague in the prosecutor's office. "Your sister has filed a police report claiming you embezzled funds from her business and stole personal items before disappearing. She's painted herself as the victim. She's trying to establish her story first, I realized. Exactly. Which makes tomorrow's meeting even more crucial. We need her to contradict her official statement. As I tried to sleep that night, my phone lit up with a message from a number I didn't recognize. Brittany doesn't know I'm texting you. It's Cameron. This has gone too far. I can help prove what they've done, but I need guarantees. Call this number if you're interested. I showed the message to David, who looked skeptical. Could be a trap to discover your location, or to get you to say something incriminating on a recorded line. Or he could actually want out, I countered. Possibly. Let me see what I can find out about him before you respond. By morning, David had discovered Cameron had a younger sister, with special needs and elderly parents who depended on his support. That could be leverage for law enforcement, he noted. A potential weak link in their operation. With all pieces in place, we made final preparations for the meeting that could either save me or complete my destruction. The recording device was secured, our story straight, backup plans established. What none of us anticipated was that Brittany would bring reinforcements of her own. The Riverside Cafe buzzed with lunchtime activity as I claimed a corner table with good sightlines to all entrances. David had helped me prepare for this meeting extensively, coaching me on what to say and, more importantly, what not to say. Let her do most of the talking, he'd advised. Ask open-ended questions. Never explicitly accuse her of anything on the recording that will just make her defensive. Act conflicted. Like you're considering rejoining them but need reassurance. Megan sat at the bar, pretending to read a magazine while actually keeping watch. David waited in a car outside, monitoring the audio feed from my recording device. We'd chosen this cafe because it was public enough to be safe but quiet enough that the recording would be clear. At 2:05, Brittany entered alone, scanning the room before spotting me. She wore oversized sunglasses and a designer outfit I recognized as new purchased. No doubt, with stolen money. You look terrible, she said by way of greeting, sliding into the seat across from me. Being homeless and bankrupt will do that, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. She sighed dramatically. None of that was necessary. You panicked and ran instead of letting us handle it. How exactly were you planning to handle the fact that we were illegally occupying someone's home? We had another property lined up already. The transition would have been seamless if you hadn't drawn attention. This was exactly the kind of admission David had hoped for. Confirmation that the Thornton Penthouse wasn't an isolated incident. And what about my identity? The loans and credit cards in my name? My drained bank accounts? Brittany leaned forward. Temporary measures. Once we close the Westlake deal next month, everything gets paid back with interest. You'd have walked away with at least 6 figures, debt-free. The Westlake deal? She smiled, seemingly pleased at my interest. High net worth investors, looking for private equity opportunities. Richard has them convinced we have exclusive access to pre-IPO shares in a tech company. They're ready to wire 7 figures. And do you have access to these shares? Of course not, she scoffed. But by the time they realize that, we'll be operating under new identities in a new city. My stomach churned at her casualness. What about the people whose money you take? Don't you care that you're ruining their lives? Rich people can afford to lose money, she shrugged. Besides, everyone's trying to scam someone. We're just better at it than most. I needed her to say more about my specific situation. I still don't understand why you had to use my identity. My accounts. Because you're clean, she explained, as if to a child. No criminal record, excellent credit, stable employment history. The perfect front. Richard and I have complications in our backgrounds. We needed a legitimate face. And Cameron? At the mention of his name, Brittany's expression darkened. Cameron's having second thoughts, getting soft, talking about his family needing him, as if we're not all making sacrifices. I was about to press further when Brittany glanced toward the entrance and smiled. Ah, perfect timing. To my horror, Richard was walking toward our table, followed by my mother. Look who I found outside. Allie, Brittany called cheerfully. Mom was so worried about you. The carefully constructed plan crumbled around me. My mother rushed to embrace me, tears in her eyes. Allison, thank God you're safe. We've been so worried. Over her shoulder, I caught Brittany's smug expression and Richard's watchful gaze. This was a calculated move. Bringing our mother to this meeting neutralized my ability to continue drawing out confessions. "Why don't we all sit down?" Brittany suggested sweetly. "I'm sure Allison has a lot to explain." "Actually," my mother said, pulling back to look at me, "I think you're the one who needs to explain, Brittany." The smile froze on my sister's face. "What?" Mom turned to face her. "Patricia showed me the messages you sent her, trying to get money by claiming Allison needed treatment. Then I spoke with David this morning. He played me some very interesting recordings of threats you and your friends sent to Allison's phone." Brittany's composure cracked. "Mom, you can't seriously believe I've made excuses for you your entire life," our mother cut in, her voice steely. "Not anymore." Richard started to stand. "This is a family matter. I should go." "Sit down, Mr. Thompson," came a firm voice from behind him. A plainclothes police detective flashed his badge. Or should I say, Ryan Thompson. "We have some questions about outstanding warrants in Florida." Everything happened quickly after that. 2 more officers appeared. Richard was handcuffed while Brittany sat in stunned silence. My recording device was collected as evidence, and formal statements were taken. The detective explained they'd been building a case against Richard for months. "Your brother-in-law's information was the missing piece," he told me. "We've had Thompson under surveillance, but couldn't connect him definitively to the investment scams until now." "My brother-in-law?" I echoed, confused. "David Palmer," he clarified. "Your sister's husband?" I turned to Megan, who had joined us during the commotion. "You're married to David? He's not just your brother?" She smiled apologetically. "We thought it might make Brittany suspicious if she knew I was married to a fraud attorney." The sibling story seemed safer. As Brittany was led away, she turned to me one last time. "I would have fixed everything, Allie. You didn't have to do this." For the first time in my life, I saw my sister clearly not as the charismatic force of nature I'd always both resented and admired, but as someone hollow, building her life on others' ruins. "You can't fix what you don't acknowledge is broken," I told her. "I hope you get help." Later that evening, in Megan and David's apartment, we received news that Cameron had turned himself in, offering extensive evidence against Brittany and Richard in exchange for consideration of his family circumstances. "It's going to be a long road," David warned as we reviewed the damage to my finances and credit. "But with the evidence we've gathered, you have a strong case for identity theft. The credit bureaus will remove the fraudulent accounts, though it will take time." My mother, who had insisted on staying, squeezed my hand. "We'll get through this together. I'm so sorry I doubted you, even for a moment." For the first time since discovering Brittany's betrayal, I felt a glimmer of hope. The path forward would be difficult, but at least now I could see it. The weeks following Brittany's arrest brought a whirlwind of legal proceedings, financial investigations, and emotional reckonings. Richard and Brittany were held without bail due to flight risk, while Cameron secured release with monitoring after providing crucial evidence against his former partners. My first priority was reclaiming my identity. With David's help, I filed comprehensive reports with all 3 credit bureaus, documenting each fraudulent account. We submitted police reports, affidavits, and evidence packets thick enough to choke a printer. "This is going to take months," David warned as we submitted yet another dispute form. "The system isn't designed for efficiency." He wasn't wrong. Credit card companies demanded endless verification. Banks required in-person visits with multiple forms of identification. Loan servicers transferred me between departments, each representative seeming more confused than the last. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but you're listed as the primary applicant," one particularly frustrating loan officer insisted. "Your signature is on all the documentation." "That's not my signature," I repeated for the 3rd time. As the police report indicates, it was forged. Living arrangements presented another challenge. I couldn't return to my old apartment, which had been rented to new tenants. My savings were depleted, my credit destroyed, and my employment history now included a fraudulent resignation. Megan and David offered their guest room indefinitely, but I was determined not to trade dependency on one person for dependency on others. "You need time to rebuild," Megan argued when I mentioned looking for my own place. "Staying here isn't charity, it's what friends do." Friends. The word carried new weight after discovering how many of my supposed friends had readily believed Brittany's lies about my mental state. Patricia had been the notable exception, standing firmly in my corner once she recognized the truth. The preliminary hearing for Brittany's case brought its own trauma. Sitting in the courtroom, watching my sister in her orange jumpsuit, I felt an unwelcome pang of empathy, despite everything she'd done. That empathy evaporated when she took the stand and blamed me for everything. My sister has always been jealous of me, she told the court, tears streaming perfectly down her face. When I achieved financial success, she couldn't handle it. She joined our investment group, then tried to take it over. When we refused, she threatened to go to the police with false accusations. Her performance was masterful, vulnerable, yet dignified, wronged, yet forgiving. Had I not lived through her betrayal, I might have believed her myself. The prosecutor methodically dismantled her story with evidence: my consistent employment history versus her lack thereof. The forensic financial trail showing money flowing from my accounts to hers, never the reverse. Testimonies from previous victims describing identical tactics. Most damning was the recording from our cafe meeting, where she explicitly detailed their fraudulent investment scheme and admitted to using my identity without permission. Throughout the proceedings, our mother sat beside me, her face a mask of grief and determination. The hardest moment came when Brittany's attorney called her as a character witness, clearly expecting her to support her eldest daughter. "Mrs. Reed," the attorney began, "would you describe your daughter Brittany as trustworthy?" Mom looked directly at Brittany before answering. "No, I would not." The shock on Brittany's face matched my own. For our entire lives, Mom had made excuses for Brittany's behavior, smoothed over her lies, forgiven her transgressions. "Brittany has always been charming and persuasive," Mom continued steadily. "She has also consistently manipulated those who love her for personal gain. I failed both my daughters by enabling this pattern for too many years." As security led Brittany from the courtroom after the judge denied bail, she called out to our mother, "You're choosing her over me? After everything?" Mom didn't respond until we were outside the courthouse. "I'm not choosing either of you over the other," she told me quietly. "I'm choosing truth." Finally, while the criminal case progressed, I focused on rebuilding. With David's connections, I secured a position at a small marketing firm willing to overlook the gap in my employment history. The salary was less than my previous job, but the work was engaging, and the people seemed genuine. Finding affordable housing proved nearly impossible with my damaged credit until Patricia unexpectedly offered a solution. She owned a small garage apartment behind her house, previously used for storage. "It needs work," she admitted, showing me the dusty space. "But the rent would be minimal, and you'd have privacy while staying close enough for support." Over several weekends, Patricia, Megan, David, and I transformed the apartment into a cozy haven. We painted walls, installed basic appliances, and furnished it with a mix of secondhand finds and contributions from their homes. When I finally moved in, the space felt more like home than anywhere I'd lived in years, not because of its amenities, which were basic, but because every element represented someone's care. 3 months after her arrest, Brittany's case took another turn when our father suddenly reappeared. Having played a minimal role in our lives since the divorce, he swept in with expensive attorneys and claims that Brittany was the victim of manipulation by Richard. "She's always been easily influenced," he told reporters outside the courthouse. "My daughter is many things, but she's not a criminal mastermind." His arrival complicated matters considerably. Despite having abandoned his parental responsibilities years ago, he now positioned himself as Brittany's staunch defender, using his financial resources to hire expert witnesses claiming she had been coerced. I received a voicemail from him after his second court appearance. "Allison, this family conflict has gone too far. Drop the charges against your sister. We can handle this privately." He hadn't bothered to learn that victims don't press or drop charges in criminal cases. The state was prosecuting Brittany based on evidence, not my wishes. His ignorance would have been comical if it weren't so infuriating. The final betrayal came when he produced alleged evidence that I had been a willing participant in the scheme, including emails supposedly showing my knowledge of the fraudulent investments. The emails were cleverly fabricated close enough to my writing style to seem plausible, but containing phrases I would never use. He's attempting to create reasonable doubt. David explained after reviewing the submissions. Standard defense tactic, but transparent in this case. The metadata doesn't match legitimate emails from your accounts. The judge ultimately excluded the fabricated evidence, but the experience left me shaken. Not only had my sister betrayed me, but now my father was actively working to discredit me to save her. Through it all, the community I'd found became my anchor. Megan and David hosted Sunday dinners where we deliberately avoided discussing the case. Patricia taught me her secret family recipes, claiming she needed someone to pass them to. My new coworkers invited me to happy hours and genuinely valued my contributions. 6 months after Brittany's arrest, the jury delivered their verdict: guilty on all counts. Richard received similar convictions, while Cameron's cooperation earned him a reduced sentence. As the bailiff led Brittany away, she looked back at me one final time. I expected to see hatred or blame in her expression, but instead found something that looked almost like relief, as if the constant deception had become its own prison long before the legal one materialized. That night, I sat on the small porch of my apartment, watching the sunset and reflecting on the strange journey from apparent good fortune to absolute loss to gradual rebuilding. The penthouse had been a mirage, beautiful, enticing, but ultimately insubstantial. What remained after its disappearance was more valuable: clarity about who I was and who I could trust. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message contained just 5 words. "I'm sorry, I mean it. B." Whether it represented genuine remorse or another manipulation, I couldn't say. Perhaps someday I'd be able to determine the difference where Brittany was concerned. For now, I set the phone aside and continued watching the sunset, focusing not on what I'd lost, but on what I was building. 6 months after Brittany's sentencing, my life had found a new rhythm. My garage apartment, once bare and utilitarian, now reflected my personality. Bookshelves filled with titles I actually had time to read, potted plants thriving on the small patio, and walls adorned with framed photographs of genuine moments with my newfound community. My credit score, while still recovering, had improved enough to qualify for a secured credit card. Financial independence remained a work in progress, but each small victory, paying bills on time, building an emergency fund, negotiating a raise at work, felt monumental after nearly losing everything. Most mornings, I joined Patricia for coffee before heading to the office. These quiet moments with her became a cherished ritual, the conversations ranging from mundane daily plans to profound reflections on life's unexpected turns. I received another letter from Brittany yesterday. I told her one such morning, stirring my coffee absently. Patricia waited, allowing me space to continue when ready. She's enrolled in a therapy program at the prison, says she's exploring the root causes of her behavior. I couldn't keep the skepticism from my voice. Apparently, our father's abandonment and mother's emotional unavailability created the perfect storm for her narcissistic tendencies. "Do you believe her?" Patricia asked gently. I shrugged. Part of me wants to. Another part remembers every other time she seemed to change, only to reveal it was another performance. Brittany's letters had been arriving monthly since her sentencing, each one a mix of apology, self-reflection, and subtle requests. She wanted to know if I was taking care of Mom, if I'd considered starting a business, if I'd thought about visiting. Each question seemed innocuous until I recognized them as information-gathering potential hooks to reestablish control whenever she was released. "You don't have to decide today whether her change is genuine," Patricia reminded me. "Or ever, really. Her journey is separate from yours now." This perspective that I could acknowledge Brittany's existence without entangling my life with hers had been revolutionary. For 3 decades, I'd defined myself largely in relation to my sister, the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who cleaned up messes rather than creating them. Without her chaos as a counterpoint, I was discovering who I actually was. My relationship with my mother had evolved as well. She had moved to a smaller apartment after selling the family home, partly from financial necessity and partly from desire for a fresh start. We met for dinner weekly, carefully rebuilding trust through honest conversations. "I failed you," she'd admitted during one particularly difficult discussion. "I saw what Brittany was doing, even as a child. But it was easier to pretend everything was normal. You became the adult, so I didn't have to be. Her acknowledgement couldn't erase the past, but it created space for a healthier future. We were learning to relate as adults rather than through the dysfunctional patterns of our earlier years. My father had disappeared again after Brittany's conviction, his brief reappearance apparently contingent upon her freedom. His abandonment stung less this time, having expected nothing different. The most meaningful development in my recovery came through an unexpected channel. David had connected me with a support group for identity theft victims, suggesting it might help my healing process. Initially, reluctant, my case seemed so extreme compared to typical fraud I eventually agreed to attend. At my first meeting, listening to others share stories of violation, powerlessness, and the struggle to reclaim their lives, something broke open within me. When my turn came to speak, the words poured out without rehearsal or censorship. The worst part wasn't the financial damage, I found myself saying. It was realizing that someone who was supposed to love me saw me as nothing more than a tool to be used. A clean credit report, a convenient scapegoat. The understanding nods around the room gave me courage to continue. I keep asking myself what I could have done differently, what signs I missed, whether I somehow invited this by always being the one who fixed everything. An older woman across the circle spoke up gently. The responsibility lies with the perpetrator, not the victim. No matter your history, you didn't deserve what happened. That simple truth, that I hadn't caused or deserved Brittany's betrayal, was intellectually obvious, but emotionally revolutionary. In the following weeks, I became increasingly involved with the group, eventually helping organize their educational outreach program. Through this work, I met other survivors who had transformed their trauma into purpose. Some became advocates for stronger consumer protections. Others developed resources for victims navigating recovery. Their resilience inspired me to consider how my experience might serve others. With guidance from David and input from the support group, I began developing workshops on financial literacy and fraud prevention. My marketing background proved surprisingly valuable in creating materials that were both informative and engaging. Local community centers hosted these workshops, attracting people across demographics. Teaching others to protect themselves became deeply healing, a way of reclaiming agency from my experience, rather than allowing it to define me as a victim. 1 year to the day after Brittany's arrest, I received an official letter from the prison where she was serving her sentence. Unlike her previous personal notes, this one came through administrative channels, formally requesting a visitation appointment. I carried the unopened envelope to my weekly dinner with Mom. "She wants me to visit," I explained, placing it on the table between us. Mom's expression remained carefully neutral. "What are you thinking?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to hear whatever she has to say. Another part feels like any contact just reopens the wound." "There's no right answer," Mom said after a moment. "Only what feels right for you right now." I decided to bring the question to my support group, where one member's perspective particularly resonated. Forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation. You can release your anger without resuming the relationship. After much reflection, I composed a response declining the visit but acknowledging receipt of her letters. I explained that while I hoped her therapeutic work was genuine, I needed to prioritize my own healing path, which currently required distance. That evening, sitting on my patio watching fireflies illuminate the garden Patricia and I had planted together, I felt an unfamiliar sense of peace, not because everything was resolved, but because I'd made a choice based on self-respect rather than obligation. My phone buzzed with a text from Megan, containing a link to a foundation seeking volunteer mentors for young adults aging out of foster care. "Thought this might interest you," she'd written. "They need people who understand how to build independence from scratch." The synchronicity felt meaningful. My journey of rebuilding financially, emotionally, socially, had given me insights that might benefit others facing their own transitions. The penthouse that had briefly seemed like my destiny now felt like a distant dream, gaudy and insubstantial compared to the authentic life I was constructing. The luxury high-rise where Brittany had nearly destroyed me stood visible from certain parts of town, its gleaming windows reflecting sunlight. Sometimes I looked at it and marveled at how thoroughly my definition of success had changed. True wealth, I discovered, wasn't measured in square footage or designer furnishings. It existed in moments of genuine connection, in the courage to establish boundaries, in creating something meaningful from adversity. As darkness settled over my small but sufficient home, I reflected on the strange gift hidden within Brittany's betrayal, the opportunity to discover my own resilience. Without the catastrophic collapse of everything familiar, I might never have found the strength to build something truly mine. I hadn't chosen the destruction, but I had chosen what to create from its aftermath. That choice to build a life aligned with my authentic values, rather than inherited expectations, was perhaps the first truly independent decision I'd ever made. The path forward wasn't perfectly clear, but it was undeniably mine. And that, I realized as stars appeared overhead, was enough. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal or loss? What helped you find strength during that process? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more survivor stories. Remember that healing isn't linear, but it is possible sometimes in ways we never could have imagined. Thank you for listening to my journey, and may you find the support you need for whatever challenges you're facing.